Welcome to the Classics Podcast Does Virgil's Aeneid with myself, Caroline Lawrence.
And me, Katrina Kelly. Hello and welcome back to the Classics Podcast Does Virgil's Aeneid, the podcast where we pick a word to springboard us into the world of Virgil's epic poem and explore themes, characters, structure, imagery, and sounds. Now, in this series, we've been looking at both the forest and the trees, but we, as I say, start with a tree, one word, and we jump in from there. In our first episode, we spoke about the word lumen, light, especially in the plural lumina, where it means eyes. Our second word, which took up 2 whole episodes because we just loved it so much, was limen, threshold, also common in the neuter plural, limina. So we've had lumina, we've had limina, but don't worry, very different word today. We're going to be taking a verb as our starting point, maybe the only time that we'll be doing this, and launching ourselves into our word of the day, Caroline, which is
Our word of the day is cano,
cano,
and the present infinitive is
canera. So an ERE ending verb. Otherwise looks pretty normal, as we would expect it to go in the Latin. But what are its principal parts, Caroline?
there cano cecini cantum. And I've just thought of another better way to remember cano than a singing can. Canary, a singing canary.
Of course. So yeah, cantum, that final part, that sort of betrays the word we're talking about, doesn't it? Because
Yeah.
from that we get canticle and other such words to
Although,
do with
although there's another
singing.
verb, canto, which goes canto, cantas, cantat, whereas cano is slightly different. So they trick you. They try to trick you.
Virgil tricking us from the very beginning. And indeed, this is the beginning. I know we're in our 4th episode, but we are going back to the very, very beginning of the Aeneid, aren't we?
Which is kind of what Virgil does. He starts in medias res and then he goes back to the beginning. And we've chosen this word because it essentially begins the Aeneid. Of course, the Aeneid in Latin starts arma virumque cano in Latin word order, but in English word order, it's I sing of arms and a man.
Exactly. And we've spoken a little bit, we've kind of brushed around the edges of talking about Homer. He's the kind of elephant in the room, isn't he, with our epic poetry? Because although Virgil plays with material from so many of the great poets and philosophers and historians who came before him, Homer is definitely the greatest, right? He provided the curriculum, I suppose, for ancient primary and secondary school. His Iliad and his Odyssey were like Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, and the Bible kind of all together. He was ancient pop culture, wasn't he?
Yeah, and we could throw in Shakespeare too. I mean, he was everything. He was the whole world almost. Yeah, and Homer, of course, starts his greatest poem, the well, I think his greatest poem, the Iliad.
Controversial opinion.
We can come out on Team Iliad and Team Odyssey and Team Dido later and Team Aeneas maybe. He starts the Iliad with the words Mena naedithea pelea deo Achilleos, sing goddess, the anger of Achilles, the son of Peleus, and he's calling on the muse. The goddess is Muse. The muse he's referring to is the goddess. The goddess he's referring to is the muse, I mean. And he starts the Odyssey with the words Andra moi ennepe musa polytropon. Andra, man. Tell me, muse, of a crafty man. But the Aeneid begins arma virumque cano, and as we've said before, and we'll say again, he basically makes the first half of the Aeneid the Odyssey, and the second half of the Iliad. Arma's telling us one of the main topics will be wars, and virumque, and nor the que, that's just and. Virum is vir, the accusative of vir is a man. So arms, battles, a man. And the third word is I. But Virgil puts himself right in at the beginning instead of these other guys.
Yeah, he's very much present. I mean, we've said there again about the 2 halves being that we've got a kind of an Iliad and an Odyssey, and that's what Virgil's doing. He's bringing them both together into one epic poem. Um, we know it's not quite as straightforward as that too, though. We've got that Iliadic funeral games we talked about last week. That
Ah,
comes
yeah.
in the Odyssean kind of half, and then in the Iliadic half, we is actually more to do with showing the burden of homecoming as well, isn't it? But I think from these opening lines, we could view the entire Aeneid as more of an Odyssey because, yes, we've got the weapons, we've got the armor right there, but we've got the man firmly in the middle in the story, alongside war. Not a different theme like we had Achilles' anger being the kind of driving force. Here it is all about the man, whether we like him or not, whether we think he's the best hero. Aeneas, he is a fighter, he's a city builder. In this story, he's a citizen and a foreigner. He's a Trojan, a Greek, an Italian, a Proto-Roman. He's kind of everything all put together. And there's a really good resource, which we will link in the show notes, which shows that the translators of the Aeneid did spend actually a lot of time reflecting on every line. We've said before how Virgil put so much effort into every line and jam-packed it with meaning. But how best to translate them, even though, I mean, that's a very simple four words to start with, isn't it? But so I think we can say that Homer is an inspiration. He is a sort of starting point, maybe even a mentor, as we've mentioned. But Virgil is trying to raise the epic bar every time, isn't he?
Yeah, and in a way, I mean, this um, Virgil was not Homer. We don't even know if Homer was one man or woman. It could have been a succession of people, and whoever he or she was, Homer was, he was taking centuries of oral poetry and kind of putting it into its best form. And this is reflected by very ancient bits of Greek in different dialects. It's a kind of a patchwork quilt, brilliantly put together. But Virgil's one man, and he wants us to know it. And this is his creation. And yes, he's referring to Homer all the time and borrowing and being even adapting as well as the other ancient poets. But he's one man, and he doesn't even call on the muse until line 8 when he finishes this long sentence, which is 7 lines long, when he says, Musa mihi causas memora, muse, remind me of the reasons. He doesn't even say sing through me. He says remind me, like I already know, but just
Yeah.
here I am. I'm Virgil. I'm doing this myself. This is my oeuvre. And now, do you think would it have been shocking for the Romans that Virgil's saying, "Yeah, the muse is going to help me, but this is my baby."
Yeah, I know. It does seem like you're sort of setting yourself up for a fall a little bit, doesn't it? But I mean, I suppose, wasn't the only writer to do this. Apollonius of Rhodes, who we mentioned in our first episode, he was writing in Greek in the 3rd century BCE, so a long time before. And he says, beginning with you, I will recall the famous deeds of men.
Aha.
So I will recall, again, suggesting that I already knew
Uh-huh.
it before, and I'm just going to remind myself with your help now. Ennius as well. It's another great sort of predecessor for Virgil. He's sort of 239 to 169 BC, so again, a little bit nearer in time. Started out his epic poem about Rome's history, so that's the Annales, by invoking the Muses, but he then goes on to claim that Homer's spirit has been reborn in him, which maybe that's even worse than Virgil. I mean, Virgil doesn't so explicitly say, I'm doing Homer, apart from the way he's doing it through his words. He doesn't claim it quite so hubristically.
Do you know what? If Virgil had got his way and they'd burned the Aeneid,
Hmm.
we would all be reading the Annales of Ennius now.
That's true. This would be the
Because
Classics podcast does the Annales, a very different
apparently it
podcast.
was genius, and I have a little. I've agreed with a poet friend of mine that we're going to write a haiku per day and send it to each other. So here's a haiku I wrote about Ennius, called, the title is "He Wanted to Be the Roman Homer," and here's the haiku: Poor old Ennius, defaced, erased, and replaced by the Mantuan.
And that's
And we'll
Virgil,
find
isn't
out
it?
we'll find out who the Mantuan is in a minute. But spoiler alert, it's Virgil. So, so in a way, when we're looking at this word Cano, we're not just looking at one word. We're looking at a letter, the O at the end of Cano, that says it's I sing. But who was this I? Who was Virgil? And first, I thought it'd be fun if we talk about who are you and who am I. People will realize we're Virgil fangirls, but I thought it might be nice to briefly tell them how we got there. And I thought it'd be fun if we do it the way Virgil did. legend says that on his deathbed he wrote his own epitaph. How fun is that? And he wanted it to be placed on a tomb in Naples, his beloved Naples. He, like me, loves Naples. And Naples was sometimes called Parthenope or Parthenope after one of the sirens who hurled herself to her death on the rocks in the sea after she failed to lure Odysseus to her rocks to his death. She was so upset she threw herself to her death. And that's what gives Naples its name. See how all pervasive Homer was? He even
Yeah, I
gives.
didn't know that story.
Uh, and by the way, I just have to say this: any Virgil lover or any classicist who visits Pompeii, do go to Naples. Don't be afraid of Naples. The mafia is not so bad there now. Yes, they're pickpockets, but just don't wear your Rolex ostentatiously and put your wallet sticking out of your pocket. Just be sensible. But when you visit Naples, which is amazing, go to this little park called the Parco Vergiliano a Piedigrotta near the Mergellina metro. There's another bigger park called the Park of Virgil on the coast. Don't go there. And this is surrounded by buildings and churches, and it's where his reputed tomb is, and it's absolutely beautiful. And it's also got one of the tunnels he built. He made with his eye beams. Remember, because he was considered a great magician in medieval Naples. And you can see his self-written epitaph there. And here's his self-written epitaph: Mantua me genuit, Calabri rapuere, tenet nunc Parthenope, cecini Pasqua, rura, duces. Mantua birthed me, Calabria snatched me away, literally the Calabrians snatched me away, and now Naples, Parthenope, holds me or has me. I sang Pasqua, pastures, rura, farms, and duces, leaders. And by the way, that cecchini, that's your perfect form of Cano, I sang.
Of course, very fitting.
Yeah. So if I were to write my two-line epitaph or a short epitaph, nobody can be as short as Virgil. I would say something like, foggy London birthed me, cinematic California raised me, Cambridge classicists lured me back to the country of my birth. I found faith, taught kids, wrote Roman mysteries.
Oh, I love it. Like the sirens, they lured you back in a good way.
Lured me back, and luckily they didn't throw themselves onto the rocks. How about you? What would your epitaph be?
Oh, a tough act to follow. I don't know if I can follow both Virgil and yourself, Caroline. I have not written or published anything, but I was sand-grown on Blackpool's shores, for sure. My parents taught me. Oxford then nurtured me with Homer and Virgil. I ran, I read, I procrastinated, and then I went for another run. Would probably be how to sum it up.
I cannot believe that you procrastinate.
It happens to us all. Oh, certainly. But
but
I
you,
find running is a great way to do something productive whilst procrastinating. The
and
long
just super quick, you don't just run, you do all sorts of things, don't you? You do javelin throwing, you do long jump. Do you do the high jump ever with the pole?
Basically trying to just be my own version of an ancient person, I think, and channel my love for the Olympics. Um, yeah, yes, I've done pole vault as well. That is a fun one. Although we're recording this actually just after the new world record has been set by, if any athletics fans out there love Mondo Duplantis, which has a great name because you have to plant the pole. So he is literally a Duplantis, reaching the scaly heights of 6 meters 30. So
Wow.
I can't, it's amazing to imagine. And those, I think, ancient Olympians and athletes would be in awe of the things that he's achieved.
Oh, fantastic. Well, we'll talk more about the athletic prowess in future episodes, I'm sure. Yours, not mine.
Well, not mine, but a character in the Aeneid we can definitely talk about for sure.
Yeah. Okay, great. So that wonderful. So his curriculum vitae, his CV, is actually just four words: Cecchini, Pasca, Rura, Duces. And just super quick, we're talking about who is Virgil.
Mhm.
The Pasqua, the Pastures, refers to his first published composition, the Eclogues, which were 10 longish poems about shepherds and life in the country. And then he wrote another collection of poems, the Georgics, called which Rura is farms, which doesn't sound very exciting, but John Dryden, who was this amazing polymath and translator living in the 1600s, who I love his translation of Virgil, and you can read it free because he's way out of copyright. Dryden called the Georgics the best poem by the best poet in the whole world, history of the world. And in it, Virgil shows how farming is very hard but important. And I can't help but think of Jeremy Clarkson doing Clarkson's Farm, showing how farming is hard but important. I'm not likening Jeremy Clarkson to Virgil, though.
And I think ancient Romans really enjoyed reading about farming, didn't they? We have so many different agricultural tracts and treatises, and we've got Cato and Varro all talking about ways of doing your husbandry and your agriculture, but also very much seeing it through this kind of golden age as well. And quite a lot of rural idyllic poetry, isn't there?
Absolutely. And the idea of I think they would like to be swanning around the woods with their pipes and, chasing nymphs, like the pastoral life, but then they appreciate all the food that is supplied by the farmers and the kind of that life. And I guess, yeah, I guess you want both. They're both idyllic worlds. And of course, what ties them all together is food.
It always is.
Bread in circuses, if we have stories and food, we're happy. And so the Duques is finally, we get to the stories bit, some really good stories. And he's going to use the world of Homer, which is all we've already got all our heroes, all the adventures, and he can play with those, filling out the ones that Homer didn't tell us about or that Apollonius didn't tell. And he can say, I can do that story. A bit like, this is totally random, but I love the Coen brothers film Fargo, and I love the Coen brothers aesthetic, their sensibility. And then a TV screenwriter called Noah Hawley kind of took that idea of the Fargo world and made, I think, 5 or 6 brilliant miniseries called Fargo. So that's a bit what Virgil's done. He said, I like this world of Homer. I'm going to play with it. But of course, he's also doing a thing. He's doing it on commission. But wait, who were the leaders? I mean, if Duques, leaders, stands for the Aeneid, who are the leaders? Because isn't it just Aeneas?
Yeah, I mean, he is a bit of a one-man band, especially as he loses, like Odysseus does, lots of his companions along the way, and isn't shown in the best light as a leader, really. I suppose.
Oh, I'm going to disagree. We can do that later. We can disagree on that, but go
Um,
on.
okay. In the meantime, though, I think there are some other leaders in there, aren't there? We've obviously got the early Italians, so we've got Turnus, we've got Mezentius, and Evander as well. And we also have the Parade of Heroes. So I guess those are leaders we're not seeing actually leading at the time, but at the end of book 6, as his father in the underworld is showing this parade of heroes, people who Aeneas has never heard of or never met, but the Roman reader has. We've got the Gracchi, we've got the Scipios in there, we've got at the very end, we also have the quite poignant, very kind of contemporary reference to Marcellus as well, Augustus's relative, who is a leader sort of taken away in his prime. So maybe that's more Virgil in his epitaph wanting to kind of show what he was doing and again sort of praise Augustus, show that that's what he was aiming with his poetry, even if he wasn't actually mentioning that many different leaders. He was kind of entering that world of heroes and bringing it into the modern setting.
Yeah, and that's fascinating because even as you've mentioned, some of those are potential leaders, aren't they?
Hmm.
Maybe cut off, and maybe he's talking to Augustus as a potential leader too, as a leader who's still young.
Yeah, and still has so much to achieve as he then does in his own view, in his Res Gestae. And Virgil's approach to history, not only that kind of paradox between is it Aeneas's past or Aeneas's future, but is also considering Virgil because he wasn't himself a Roman citizen, was he, to begin with? So they weren't really his direct inspiration or his leaders, his historical figures.
Yeah, that's nice. A nice thought because he was born north of the Po, which at that time didn't mean you were automatically a Roman citizen, although of course he's an Italian and
Mm.
everything. So in a way, he's a little bit like Aeneas. He's an outsider, and of course he grew up during those terrible years of the Civil War, which students of Roman history will know all about, Julius Caesar, and you'd have to choose a side, and if you chose the wrong side, you could literally lose your life or your farm. And
Yeah.
one scholar I really rate, Daniel Mendelsohn, an American classicist, he says that he also wrote a book about Holocaust survivors. He's Jewish, and he looked up some of his lost relatives, ancestors, and as he came back to teach the Aeneid, he realized that he sees the same signs of PTSD in Aeneas that he saw in some of these Holocaust survivors. And I wonder if Virgil himself wasn't traumatized by things he saw during the Civil War that haunted him.
Mm.
And so, just to get quickly to why he wrote this, the commission is that when he was finishing the Georgics, these books about poems about farming, he finished them the year after the Battle of Actium, which of course is when Octavian, the nephew of Caesar, won a decisive battle against Antony and Cleopatra. And so this is, a lot of people start his principate from this point and start to call him Augustus, I think, from after the Battle of Actium. It's a landmark. It's a threshold. And so, and Virgil's now in Rome, and he was reciting bits of the Georgics to let's call him Octavian Augustus, because that way we know who he is. We
Yeah.
can keep track of the past. And he says, in one of the Georgic, he includes a plea that a young leader would save the world in ruins. And it was probably soon after this that Octavian, either directly or through Maecenas or another mentor, another patron, encouraged Aeneas to write an epic poem that would help establish his, Octavian Augustus's, character and his legitimacy, a kind of yeah, his setting out his whole aim and his ethos and what he hopes to do. And so that's amazing. Imagine if Donald Trump could commission someone to write his, epic. Let's not say that Octavian Augustus is Trump, but it's like getting someone to spin your story and promote you in a really positive way. So Virgil worked on this for 10 years, and I think we mentioned earlier that he worked really slowly. But he wasn't just working in isolation. He would come out of his his cave every so often and read bits in progress, which I think is fascinating as he's writing it. And he would read it to Octavian to assure him, yes, I'm writing this. And one reading apparently was so powerful it made Octavian's sister faint. And we can
Wow.
maybe get to that later. And Propertius, a contemporary of Virgil's, wrote that something greater than the Iliad is being born. That's amazing.
Okay, so he might have fans amongst his peers and amongst those he's writing for. I wonder though if every Roman kind of thought he was so great. Sometimes when these things really set themselves up or they do become a classic, a modern classic at the time, then they can sometimes be, a little bit, well, I don't know if cliched is the word, if he's creating the cliches, but I think the Romans were also a little bit self-aware, weren't they? They weren't uncritically besotted with Virgil because although these opening lines were obviously really famous and were setting off that mission and the story to come, we found in Pompeii that there are some sort of parodies of that opening line. So there's one example, this is again in the hexameter, so using that epic style. It's Folone ulamque cano, non arma virumque. I sing of fullers and the screech owl, not arms and the man. And that's been found in Pompeii next to a picture of a fleeing Aeneas on a wall. So we know that that is a direct reference to this epic poem.
Can I
And
interrupt
also,
you for a sec? Is Aeneas slightly rude in that poem? And remember, the Fullers clean clothes with urine, don't they? So this is
exactly.
really
So it's not the nicest, right? They're talking about horrible smells, horrible screeching sounds, and bringing it down to the mundane level as well. That saying that, you can have your epic of Aeneas, but actually our epic is our tale of everyday life. And the noises that we have from Pompeii, it's a really evocative image and also just shows, I think, a great sense of humour. It does also prove, though, that those opening lines were famous. They were really well known, hence that a joke could be made out of them because when we're talking about Virgil's biography and getting a sense of who he is and him starting with Cano, I sing, and then the muses come a bit later, there are actually some disputed lines at the beginning of the Aeneid which could have come earlier and would potentially have sort of fitted in a little bit more within that epic tradition of a bit about, this is I am this person, I sing of eclogue type songs. I do work that's pleasing to farmers, but now I'm going to sing about the arms of the man. But this has been very much disputed, and I think, as we say, the sense that arma virumque Cano is the famous bit suggests that that really was the beginning that was handed down across the generations, and maybe, at some point some scribes have written some of these other lines and put them in, and they're not the authentic Virgil. But we'll pop a link in the show notes to an interesting article that explains a little bit more about that and some of the translations that we've said. You mentioned Dryden before, Caroline. Is that one of your favourites or others that you enjoy as well for this opening
Well,
section?
I am enjoying the new McGill-Wright translation very, very much. But Dryden, when we get to some of his literally purple passages, I'll show some of my favorite, absolutely favorite passages. But shall we read the first 7 lines of the Aeneid?
I think we
And
should.
and then I'll tell you what, I'll let you translate. You read the McGill-Wright translation, and I'll do Dryden's, which isn't one of his. It's not one of my favorite. But here, anyway, here it is in Latin.
Okay.
Um, Arma virumque cano Troiae qui prima saboris Italiam fato profugus la vignaque venit, littera multilet terris jactatis et alto, vi superum saevae memorem unonis obiram, multa quoquet bello passus dum conderet urbem, inferetque Deus latio genus unde Latinum, Albanique patres at qualtae moenia Romae, sorry. And again, you can hear where it's clipping along and then it's getting a little bit more solemn. So in the the two penultimate lines, multa quoquet bello passus, many things he also suffered in war, dum conderet orbem, while he was establishing or founding the city. And that word condo we're going to come back to. Inferetque Deus latio genus unde Latinum, and he brought and to bring the gods to Latium, from whence the Latin race. And it's, I mean, books have been written on these first 7 lines about how one of the words will refer backwards and forwards, but let's look at some of the English translations. So you do the next one.
Indeed, because as you say, he's not only got to get somewhere, he's not got to get home like Odysseus, he's got to conderet, found a city, and bring the Deos, the gods as well. So in English, using McGill-Wright's translation, I sing of arms and of a man displaced by fate, the first to leave the coast of Troy for Italy and its Lavinian shores. The power of the gods and a vicious wrath of unforgetting Juno hurled him far across the sea and lands, and he endured still further pain in war. The price to found his city and install his gods in Latium. The Latin race, the Alban lords, the walls of soaring Rome, from here they all began.
Beautifully read, thank you. And I think I'm right in saying McGill and Wright. There's a long section at the beginning about how they translated, and I think it's dactylic pentameter because otherwise it would just, and they add a line every 5 lines, so they try to keep the length the same. But you can see there's definitely a meter, a rhythm in that as you
Yeah.
read it. Now Dryden was amazing. Not only did he do it in meter, but he rhymes every 2 lines. And it is extraordinary. And he will add things and extrapolate, and we'll get to some of that later, and sometimes brilliantly. Um, so here's Dryden's version. And again, he was writing in the 1600s. Arms and the man I sing who forced by fate and haughty Juno's unrelenting hate, expelled and exiled, left the Trojan shore, long labors both by sea and land he bore, And in the doubtful war before he won the Latian realm and built the destined town, his banished gods restored to rights divine and settled sure succession in his line, from whence the race of Alban fathers come, and the long glories of majestic Rome.
And I wonder how long it took him to do that. If we're saying that Virgil spent so much time on every single line to then get everything to rhyme, it's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing, and he has some absolutely brilliant and even funny, very twinkly in his eye translations. So we'll get to some of those. But I do. The only thing about Dryden is it's like eating dark chocolate. You just have to have a little bit, or it gets to be too much and overwhelming.
Yeah, I
It,
don't think I could sit and read in one go,
yeah,
large
it
sections.
overwhelms you. Whereas
Yeah.
the McGill Wright, you can definitely. I've been listening to it on audiobook, which is I think the way it's meant to be heard.
Mhm.
Yeah, and many. So we're coming to a place. What I'd like to do is many people have written about this famous opening, people who've taught it, who've studied it, and who know it so well. But I thought it'd be fun to look at it in a way that I don't think anyone has ever looked at it. Um, and through my love of cinema and storytelling and these little recipes for story formulas and things, and purists might scream, but um, we've already talked about a longer formula called the hero's journey. And when I was starting to write my Roman mysteries, I didn't know how to write plot. And then I came across a story structure course by a Hollywood screen guru called John Truby in 12 cassette tapes, which many people won't even know what is a cassette tape.
Old school. Did you have to wind them with a pencil
I
if they
had
got
to
stuck?
wind them back and stuff and listen to them on my Sony Walkman or my boom box. Yes, I'm a boomer. Um, in more ways than one. So, and this, John Truby said he has several steps, but he says of all these steps, 7 are crucial to any good story. And when I go into schools and teach kids as young as 7 or 8, I give them this little formula for story structure, and it's so simple but so powerful. And I just want to go through it now, and then we're going to apply it to the Aeneid. So, the 7 steps, according to my mentor, John Truby, are a 3-step opening, a 1-step middle, and a 3-step end. You start off with the hero who has a problem. So we've already got the character. It's not the character of the setting. This is the what, the plot. You start off with the problem, and the hero in any story, film, book, platform game, you start off the hero will have a problem. They also have a need, which is the thing they need to learn, and they'll know about their problem. That'll be obvious, but they don't know maybe what they need to learn to become the best they can be. So step 1 is the problem. Step 2 is the desire. They see something that will solve their problem. And in all the best stories, the desire is something concrete that you can see and touch and hold, like a bottle of magic potion, a golden fleece, the beautiful princess, the sword in the stone, whatever it is. It's a thing we'll know when the hero has got it. And sometimes if it's not so clearly visible, there'll be a little symbol of their desire. Like in the Paddington film, Paddington's desire is to go to London where he'll be assured of a warm welcome. And there's a little snow globe of London that's a kind of little visual, concrete reminder of his desire. So the hero has a problem, then they see something, they want that. And we all can identify with desires. We have desires every day, big and little. The 3rd step is the opponent. And this is someone who's going to clash with your hero as they go for their desire to solve the problem. Now, in life, we don't want opponents, but let's face it, we have opponents. And if you actually think about it, the lessons we learn the best are when we compete against someone or struggle with someone and then learn a lesson. That's the one we remember. So opponents are necessary. And of course, they make it much more interesting to read about than hero wants the thing, he goes for it and he gets it. That's not very exciting. So that's your beginning. You can set up that in your first sentence or page or scene often. The whole middle of the story is the plan. The hero must come up with a plan to defeat the opponent to get the desire to solve the problem. And the plan almost always involves a journey with a crossing of a threshold.
Of course.
Now, near the end of the story, in a short story, these steps they just repeat once. Near the end of a story, you have the final battle between the hero and the opponent, and that will determine whether they get the thing they desired, the prize. But whether they get the prize or not, the most important thing is they will learn something. And this is the whole point of a story, is to teach us. So the knowledge is step 6. And the prize I put in brackets because you can get that or not. If you get that and the knowledge, it's a win-win. If you get just the prize and not the knowledge, that's okay. If you get knowledge and not the prize, that's pretty good. If you never learn anything and don't get the prize, that's a tragedy. Or if you learn too late. And then the final step is the new level. Your hero either ends up on a higher level or a lower level, because we don't always want everything to end up where it starts. Now I'm going to run through these steps. I'm going to do them now with applying them. Well, just before I apply them to the Aeneid, and I'm going to do that in a sec. These steps repeat over and over in a story, often in every scene, in every chapter. And sometimes there's not always an opponent, but you can simplify those 7 steps with what I called WAG, want, action, grasp. The hero wants something, they take action, they grasp. And grasp is good because it can either mean to get it, physically hold it, or to understand it, or both. And again, this is the way we live out our lives. Every day we have a desire, we want something, and we go for it, and we often find some opposition. At the end of one of our other episodes, we talked about stories as change machines. That's another Hollywood guru, Blake Snyder's phrase, how every character should have a character arc. And this is how they develop and how they learn and how they grow through these battles and these crossings of thresholds, through the journey. Recently, in one of her Stand Up for the Classics episodes, and we're recording this in autumn of 2025, Natalie Haynes summarized the Aeneid in under half an hour. Highly recommended. Using these 7 beats, I'm going to try to give an overall view, not book by book, but the character arc of Aeneas's journey in under 5 minutes. So his problem is that his city and most of his fellow citizens have been destroyed. Clear problem. His need is to learn to be a good leader, to maximize his potential as a leader. He's been called by the gods to be a leader. And to do that, he's going to have to put the needs of his people above his own desires. He's going to need to show piety rather than furor, rage, or anger. His desire, step 2, is to found a new Troy, a new homeland for himself and his refugees. His opponent is Juno, the angry goddess, savage anger, who will recruit many agents or sub-opponents to her cause. So he'll have minor opponents, but they're all really under the jurisdiction of his main opponent, Juno. And 2 of the sub-opponents are obviously Dido and Turnus. We'll talk later about how in a love story, the lover is often the opponent. This is fascinating. His plan, step 4, is to take refugees in ships built of magic wood from a sacred grove, and to sail around the Mediterranean following clues and oracles, figure out where it is he's meant to establish this new city, and then to establish the new city through battles if he must. That's his plan. He's going to fight many battles, but the big battle near the end, I think, is the one where he fights one-on-one with Turnus right near the end in the last few lines of the whole poem. And Turnus is, of course, one of the Latins, a resident of Italy. He's like Achilles, and he's big and strong. And my screenwriting guru, John Truby, claims that the most important step of these 7 is the revelation. What will the hero learn after the battle? Does Aeneas achieve his desire, that little prize? Yes, I think he does. Does he learn anything? I wonder. And do you remember that I quoted Jeffrey Stedman in one of his commentaries last time?
Oh yeah, yes, let me pull that up. So he said some scholars believe Aeneas is making a transition in Book 2 from this traditional Homeric hero who strives through brave deeds to achieve immortal glory, to then Virgil's ideal of the Roman hero who embodies pietas, piety, devotion to family, community, and gods.
Right. So that's so fascinating because book two is actually the beginning because he's telling
Hmm.
it. If you take it as an arc, it starts with the destruction of Troy. And so what Stedman is saying that some scholars say he's already learned to put, unlike Achilles and Odysseus who go for their own desire, he's learned to be a leader and put his people's desire, the god's desire, above his own.
Even
And
though he fails so many times in doing that, doesn't he? And he has
yeah,
to lose
yeah.
people very dear to him along the way, beginning with his wife and his father and his lover and his helmsman, to realize what this sort of sacrifice is actually about and how he can't just be miserable about his own burden in the sense that he's got to do this alone, but he's got to rally together for the common good.
And it's ironic because sometimes the way in the times when he succeeds in being a leader and doing what the gods want, as you say, it causes him intense pain.
Hmm.
Like when he leaves Dido. Um, so this is it's so complex and it's so nuanced. It's so fascinating. And and I gave us a question to ponder that if Aeneas has already transitioned from a Homeric hero to a Virgilian hero by the end of book two, and we think he has he actually learned anything by the end of the poem, 10 books later? And I'm going to argue no, he hasn't. And in a way, he's like all of us. He's always learning the same lessons or not over and over again daily. And I think that's what makes him such a brilliant modern hero because he's like us.
Yeah.
He's not always succeeding.
Yeah, he's fundamentally flawed in because he's human and he's not, although he has this the divine link of parentage like Achilles does, and that sort of makes Achilles this incredible figure. Aeneas does have times where he has a lot of what you would call a mentee bee. He has a lot of mental breakdowns as he goes through, as he comes to terms with trying to stay steadfast to his mission. And as you say, the pain that will take him through over the course of many journeys and many books of this poem. And by the very end, we are left with that really unsettling scene and the sense that yes, he has managed to control himself. He's not that Homeric hero. He's not going for his Aristeia, which is his moment, his kind of time, his rampage. He's part of gaining eternal glory in the old style. He's about to show compassion and he's about to show restraint. But then there's something at the very end, and in this case, a sign of something linked to somebody whom he loved that reminds him and leaves us with that uncertainty of how he's going to act and is he going to do the right thing? And perhaps he doesn't, so perhaps he hasn't learnt that much after all.
Yeah, it's fascinating. He's vacillating between being the Homeric hero and the Virgilian hero. He's up and down like the waves on the sea. He's being tossed terras jactatus et alto, isn't he? On land and on sea. Oh my gosh, we've been talking for so long, but we've got to talk more about Cano, don't we?
We do. I think we're going to have to come back and do a little bit more because we want to talk more about not that we've done the I part of that verb, the cano, the who was Virgil, and we haven't done so much on the sing part. So we're going to come back to Cano to talk more about singing and music and what epic poetry was sounding like, who it was performed by. But we're also in that case going to focus on the musa part as well. Come back for more on Virgil and his muses.
Yay.